The resolutions adopted by the Human Rights Council did not fully reflect the gravity of the human rights situation on the ground, and it failed to give a clearer and stronger mandate to independent actors such as the Office of the High Commissioner and Special Procedures to monitor and follow the human rights situation. This was particularly the case on Sudan, on Mali, but also to some degree on Yemen and South Sudan. For several months now, the Human Rights Council lags behind the General Assembly and the international community as a whole in calling for clear accountability for the crimes committed in Syria, which would include asking the Security Council to refer the situation to the International Criminal Court. One of the key suggestions was the appointment by the Secretary General of a high-level focal point on reprisals who would step in if there are cases of alleged intimidation or reprisals. Despite the attention on reprisals during the session, a lot of states still resort to this practice, and again we saw many human rights defenders at this session being followed, being taken pictures of. Some even received death threats by phone because they engaged in Geneva and in the Human Rights Council's mechanisms. The Council also adopted a fairly innovative resolution on the protection of journalists, and very importantly it calls on states to share best practices on how they can better protect journalists and to be inspired by the existing efforts of protecting human rights defenders. Often journalists and human rights defenders, while they carry out similar work, they also face similar threats and challenges, and therefore the lessons that have been learned in developing of protection programs for human rights defenders, in many cases with some adaptations, can also be used to better protect journalists. Sadly, we've also seen a continuation of the old struggle between universality and cultural relativism. The Russian Federation again proposed and successfully pushed through a controversial resolution on the issue of traditional values. Tradition is often used to justify practices that undermine human rights, such as violence against women, restrictions to freedom of expression and assembly. It was particularly disappointing that several states, primarily from Latin America, opposed on substance the resolution on traditional values, but then did not have the political courage to vote against the text. It's important that the universal condemnation of reprisals that we've seen at this and previous sessions of the Human Rights Council is followed up on by action. It is time for the Human Rights Council to take a resolution which outlines concrete steps that states and other actors of the international human rights system can take to stop reprisals, to prevent reprisals, but when they occur, to address them in a decisive manner. The March session will also feature the presentation of a report by the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders on the role of national human rights institutions in supporting human rights defenders.